Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We have the privilege of learning from Josh Legler this morning on Performance Measures Dashboard Review. Josh is our resident expert in the Performance Measures Dashboard, so we're really lucky to have him walk through these with us. If you have questions during this presentation, this is a really informal setting, so you're welcome to unmute your phone, ask questions, use the chat feature. Chris Hoffman with NEMSIS will watch the chat feature as well and make sure your questions get answered. There is generally enough time to address issues, questions as they come up. So feel free to make this a participatory conversation. Let's go ahead and turn the time over to Josh. We really appreciate you doing this for us, Josh. I think it's a great dashboard, and it certainly is one that can help all of our stakeholders. So we appreciate you doing this for us.
Well, thanks, Julianne. Just turned on my screen sharing. Is that looking all right?
That looks great.
Okay, great. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to take a few minutes today to talk to you about work we've been doing with performance measures at NEMSIS and using the National EMS database data. I'll spend just a few minutes on kind of some history and background. We'll spend most of the time looking at the performance measure dashboard that has been developed. And as Julianne said, we have plenty of time for questions and comments during this presentation, so feel free to interrupt me or ask questions at the end as well. So let's jump in. A little bit of history on EMS performance measure development. You might recall back in 2009, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration came out with some loosely developed ideas for EMS performance measures. We started to kind of get serious about EMS performance measurement with the EMS Compass project that was conducted from 2015 to 2017. The EMS Compass project kind of, I guess, piloted or put in place a methodology for developing EMS performance measures that would have an evidence base behind them, that would have some expertise in forming them, that would be practical and measurable, and that would be worth measuring, that if we made a difference in those things, it would be worthwhile. And the EMS Compass project, over the 2 years or so that it was active, actually developed 45 performance measures in various topic areas. That project came to a conclusion, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration funded the successor to EMS Compass for a long-term maintenance to EMS performance measures. And that organization is called the National EMS Quality Alliance, or NEMSQA. So NEMSQA was formed in 2018 and is currently active today. And what it did is it took the EMS performance measures that were developed by EMS Compass, and it reviewed all of those 45 measures and selected some to move forward for what they called respecification. So they put them back through the process again, refined them, made changes and tweaks based on feedback and experience, and republished them. So up to this point, the National EMS Quality Alliance has published 11 EMS performance measures. So they didn't republish everything that EMS Compass did. And they will maintain these measures going forward. So on about an annual basis, they'll look at measures that have been published before, and they may make adjustments to them, and they'll publish new measures. They're actually in a round right now of seeking public input to develop their next round of new measures. Now, I'd like to show you the NEMSQA website today, but we discovered that it went down yesterday and is still down this morning. So I can't show you the website, unfortunately. It is at NEMSQA.org. So I would recommend that you just kind of put that on your to-do list to check out NEMSQA.org and maybe wait a day or two and we'll see if it comes back up. I can't show you the website, but I do want to show you what they publish for their performance measures. And so I have a sample here of a NEMSQA performance measure specification document. This document is 42 pages long, so it's quite extensive and detailed. I just want to kind of show you the sort of detail that is in it. This is the measure for hypoglycemia 01, which measures treatment administered for hypoglycemia patients. And what you'll see in these measure specification packages is very detailed information about what the measure is, what it's trying to measure, what its purpose is, and then this detailed information about how the measure is actually calculated in the data. So we'll see here, for example, they provide what they call the pseudocode for a numerator and a denominator for this measure. And so we've got all the exact codes, how to calculate this measure. The idea here is that this measure could be implemented by software products, and regardless of which product it's implemented in, the results would be the same. The calculations would all be the same. So in addition to the pseudocode, then it has extensive information about the rationale and purpose of the measure and so on. Lots of additional information here. So that's what you'll find when you go to NEMSQA.org for each of the performance measures. As I mentioned, you'll also find a link on their website for submitting ideas for new performance measures during the currently open round of public input. Any questions about EMS Compass and NEMSQA and those efforts to develop EMS performance measures? Okay. All right, so let's get specific to the performance measure dashboard that we're going to be looking at today. NEMSIS is implementing and has implemented a dashboard that allows you and anyone in the public to see how EMS is doing in these various EMS performance measures. Because we have all of the data from the National EMS database, we can implement any of the performance measures that rely entirely on national EMS data. Keep in mind that in the NEMSIS data set, there are data elements that are labeled as national elements, and those are the ones that get submitted to the National EMS database. There are other elements that are not submitted to the national database. So when we look at these performance measures, many of the ones that have been published so far are all based on national elements. And so we can calculate these performance measures across the country with the National EMS database. There may be other measures that'll come along that will use data elements that are not national elements, and we will not be able to implement those ones at the NEMSIS level. Those would need to be implemented in local software products or state products. Okay, so we have been chipping away at implementing these performance measures, and on the left side, I've listed the 7 performance measures that we have implemented so far, and on the right side, 4 additional measures that we're currently working on that will be implemented between now and the end of this year. So we've implemented the measure for hypoglycemia, that one that I showed you the specification for. 2 safety measures related to lights and sirens use during response and transport. A measure about blood glucose evaluation. That was actually a measure that was published by EMS Compass and was not brought forward by NEMSQA. So it was retired. We had already implemented it before NEMSQA retired it. So we've kept that one available in the dashboard. The second seizure measure is looking at patients with status epilepticus who received an intervention. We have a stroke measure looking at suspected strokes that received a stroke assessment. And finally, a trauma measure, injured patients who were assessed for pain. The 4 that we have remaining to develop, in the order in which we're going to develop them here, the second trauma measure is to look at whether injured patients were reassessed for pain later in the call after interventions were performed. 2 pediatrics measures, respiratory assessment for patients in certain conditions, and then administration of beta agonist for pediatric asthma. And finally, the third trauma performance measure will be effectiveness of pain management for injured patients. So it's looking at not only did we assess the pain, but did we actually reduce the level of pain that they were feeling throughout the call. So those are the measures that are available or will be available in the NEMSIS Performance Measures Dashboard. So with that, we're going to switch over to do a demonstration of the dashboard and see how we can use it. Let me show you how to get to the dashboard. You'll go to the NEMSIS homepage at nemsis.org, go up to the View Reports menu and choose Public Reports. In Public Reports, choose the version 3 dashboards. And this one is currently the first dashboard listed on the page, the Performance Measures Dashboard. It also has a user guide and an intro video. Here is the Performance Measures Dashboard. It also contains a link right here to that user guide. And I want to show you the user guide. The user guide just provides instructions on how to use the dashboard. I'm going to demonstrate that today, so I won't spend any time here in the user guide, except to say that if you're wondering about how the various categories are actually compiled or described, then the user guide is the place to come. It'll tell you exactly which data elements we used and how we calculated these various categories by which we're slicing and dicing the data. Also, the guide lists the specifications of all of the performance measures that have been implemented. So I'll click on that. And we'll see here, for example, hypoglycemia 01. Here's all the pseudocode that I showed you from the NEMSQA specification document, as well as a link to the NEMSQA specification itself right here on this page. So this is a great place to start if you want to understand exactly how each performance measure was calculated, and with that reference back to the NEMSQA specification. So that's what you'll find in the user guide there. Okay, so I've brought up the performance measure dashboard. Here you can select which performance measure you want to look at. So for example, if I go for trauma 01, pain assessment of injured patients, it'll show you that there, over the period of time, which is 2+ years of data, we have about 2 million patient care reports where there was an injured patient. And what we're looking here is whether that injured patient had a pain assessment recorded by EMS. And we can see the performance trend over time. And then as we get down here, we can start to filter down this data by various attributes of the EMS agency or the response. The idea here is that you, work for a particular EMS agency. You know some things about what your agency is like, where you're located geographically, whether you're urban or rural, whether you're paramedic or EMT level, whether you transport or not, if you're a fire department or hospital or community-based, etc. And so what you can do is you can use this dashboard to compare the performance in your own agency to agencies that are in a similar bucket as your agency. So of course you can compare your performance just nationally, but we do see that the performance does vary by agency, or by the different areas where they're located or the different types of service they provide. And so this is helpful to be able to compare your agency to similar agencies rather than just the entire country. Okay, so let's play around with it. I'm actually going to switch to Safety 01, use of lights and sirens during response to scene. This, the title of this measure is somewhat misleading, but we've kept it the way that NEMSQA wrote it. What this is actually measuring is the percentage of calls where EMS went to the scene without lights and sirens. So the idea here is to decrease the amount of lights and sirens use. And as the lights and sirens use decreases, the performance will go up on this performance measure. So if everyone went silent to the scene on every call, this measure would be at 100%. If everyone went lights and sirens to the scene on every call, this measure would be at 0%. Okay, so let's see though how it kind of changes based on area and type of agency. So we see here that it varies by geography. In the Western region, agencies are more likely to go silent to the scene than say in the South, where they're more likely to use lights and sirens. I'm gonna go ahead and click on West. So let's say my agency is located in the Western US, the Western region. So when I click on West, it recalculates all the other categories. So now I'm looking, if I look at urbanicity, I'm looking at urbanicity in the Western region. So urban areas in the Western region versus suburban, rural, or wilderness areas in the Western region. Let's say my agency is an urban agency. I serve an urban area, so I can click on urban. So I am now filtering this down to urban areas in the Western region. I'll move on to organization status. And let's say my agency is a non-volunteer organization status. Everyone is a paid employee. You see there's a big difference here between the volunteer and non-volunteer agencies in terms of how they go to lights and sirens or not to scene. So I'm going to click on non-volunteer, and it has further filtered this data down. Now I'm going to look at organizational type, and you'll see there's a huge difference here based on org type. So in agencies in the Western US serving urban areas with non-volunteers, fire departments are going lights and sirens on almost every call. Only 5% of their responses are going silent. And you can see there's 4 million records contributing to that measure there. Whereas private non-hospital agencies, they are going silent to the scene 26% of the time. There's just under 6 million records contributing to that one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pick that my agency is a fire department. And it will now further adjust the remaining measures. I can look at my annual agency patient contact volume. And I could say, well, my agency serves 10,000 to 50,000 responses or patients per year. So I can click on that one and filter it further. And finally is my agency BLS, ALS, or one of these specialty ones like nurse, physician, or specialty care. And so I'm going to say my agency is, let's go with a BLS agency. Okay, having selected all of these, I'm going to scroll back up to the top. So this performance trend line has been adjusting itself along the way as I've been selecting the various categories. And so this performance trend line now represents, it represents agencies in the Western US that are urban, non-volunteer fire departments with 10,000 to 50,000 calls per year at the BLS level. That's what the performance trend now represents, and that's what the number up here represents. So I could then calculate this performance measure using the software I have for my agency and see how my agency is doing on this measure. And then I can come here and compare and see how my agency compares to this nationwide collection of agencies that are similar to my agency. In fact, what we envision for the use of this data is not only that people might come and use this dashboard from the nemsis.org website, but also that software developers would actually develop a connection to the data source that we've published for this dashboard. And as they use that data source, they could pull this data into their native software analytical reporting product. And then they could develop charts and graphs that allow you to compare your own data alongside this national comparison data. Excuse me. And so, for example, they could come up with something like this, where there's a chart that gets generated in your own software product that you use, and it has a trend line for your agency on how you're doing on a particular measure. And then along with that, your software product could provide this additional trend line that shows the national data, how your agency compares to the nation. That additional trend line would be sourced from the data that we've published that drives this national dashboard. Okay, so to say that in a different way, we have published a web service that is available to software developers. They can grab that data, they can do a mashup of that data into their own products so that they can show their customers a single chart that illustrates both their local performance and the national comparison performance. Okay, so that is our drive-through of the Performance Measures Dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and just move my screen back over to the dashboard itself. And I want to open it up for questions and discussions at this point and see any questions you have or things that you'd like to play around with that we could demonstrate in this dashboard. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free to unmute yourself. We're also watching the chat box as well.
Hi, this is Eric Mays from Ohio. Just
Yes.
a quick question. You're talking about potentially being able to tie into this to be able to see the national, to be able to get at the national aggregates and pull these over. Do you see this as being able to tie into this via an API or some kind of direct database connection where we could connect our reporting tool like a SAS or a Tableau directly into into your database and then pull over the aggregated data to then do something else with?
Yeah, good question. It'll be through a web services API.
Okay.
So the technical documentation for that service is available through the technical resources menu on the NEMSIS website, and then go to web services.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. On the web services page, we have the general information about the NEMSIS submission web service, but at the bottom of the page, we have the technical guide for the Performance Measures API. That'll run through how a software developer could develop a web service client that would query this web service and retrieve the data. Then they could, of course, store that data locally. And at that point, yeah, you could bring it into SAS or some other platform that you're using to integrate it into your reports.
Or it looks like if we use Tableau, so as a Tableau user, we'd be able to just potentially tie directly into your dashboard on your Tableau server.
I'm not sure. That's a good question. Yeah, whether you could use Tableau at your location and tie into like a published Tableau data source. I'll need to check on that.
Okay, well, I'll take a look at that document. So thank you.
Okay, yeah, the documentation will go through the web service, the SOAP-based web service. But yeah, we haven't really discussed the question of actually publishing the Tableau data source for native Tableau development. So I'll check on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there was a question from Max in the chat. Can a state EMS office view statewide or countywide data in the dashboard form in addition to national level data? The answer to that is no. We only have the national level data. So the closest that a state would be able to get is that they could look into geography here and not only see, for example, west, but they could drill down a little further and go, for example, Pacific versus mountain in the west region, so they can go down to the division level. But that's as far as they'll get. So there is no state specific version of the dashboard. This is the only dashboard available is the one that's publicly available to everyone. Any other questions? Okay, pretty quiet. It's a pretty straightforward dashboard. We hope it is useful to people to start not only looking at their own performance, but being able to have a little bit of a benchmark, a little bit of a comparison to how their performance looks compared to others across the country that are similar to them. So I welcome you to check out the dashboard again through the View Reports menu, go to Public Reports, and then click on V3 Dashboards to get to the Performance Measures Dashboard. Play around with it, and also I really encourage you, if you're an EMS agency or a state, a customer of an EMS reporting software, I encourage you to talk to your software vendor about utilizing the web service API that we've built so that they can bring this data natively into the software product that you use, so that you could run your reports right there within your software product and have those comparisons right in front of you between your agency or your state and the nation. I thank you everyone for your time today, and hope you get some good use out of this dashboard. So that wraps things up. Chris or Julianne, I don't know if Julianne was still on, but I'll...
Julianne hopped off, but
okay.
I am here. No, thank you very much for all that information, Josh. I'm sure everybody here is going to put that information to good use. If you do have a moment later on where you do come up with a question, you're using the dashboard, and we're available, just hit the NEMSIS.org website and hit the support tab, and it has our contact information underneath there. If you need to come up with if you have a question that you need answered later on, or you're actually trying to implement this and you have questions beyond there. Other than that, I hope everybody's staying safe and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.